This week on Heartland Highways, we'll meet John Conrad, who has a passion for collecting and restoring military history, including his pride and joy, a World War II command car.
Then we'll visit Mattoon resident Wally Taylor. Wally's what you call a stover. He collects and restores unique and beautiful wood stoves from years gone by.
We'll also learn more about the origins of the Hippie Memorial in Arcola and talk to Charleston repurposer Jim Standerfer. That's just ahead on this edition of Heartland Highways, so don't go away. Heartland Highways is made possible in part by EIU's Academy of Lifelong Learning, providing all community members an outlet for their educational, social, and creative pursuits, opportunities to learn new skills, engage in topics of interest, and explore new areas of learning, available for people of all ages. More information available at 581-5114.
Hello and welcome back to Heartland Highways. I'm Kate Pleasant.
And I'm Lori Casey. We learned about the man in this first story while we were shooting another story at the Vermilion County War Museum in Danville, Illinois.
That's right. One of the guys said, you have to meet this man in Eugene, Indiana. He's got a great collection of war memorabilia. He's a reenactor, he's been in major motion pictures, and he's restored a 1941 Dodge Command car.
Well, that sounded like the type of person we needed to meet, so we headed over to Indiana and met up with John Conrad.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
This command car is just one item in the varied collection of John Conrad, a historian, reenactor, restorer, and did we mention curator of his own museum? John is always happy to share his stories and love of history to people who stop by his place, known as Grandpa John's Little Museum.
It's 60 years of collecting and items that I have personally made. It starts basically with the French and Indian War, as I have been a reenactor for probably 40 years. And it has progressed up through the Second World War. I have a few items that are from Vietnam period and Korea. But that's pretty much the extent of it. It's not all military, as the office area is more into the old gas stations of the 50s. It's reminiscent to me, and that's why I had an interest in collecting that kind of thing.
John's museum is filled with nostalgia and things we don't see anymore, like old cameras, oil cans, a crank telephone, and this vintage cigarette vending machine. A love for history goes a long way back for John. He started reenacting back in the 1960s and then got into military reenacting a few years later. For reenactors, using historically accurate replicas of guns, knives, and cannons is important and something that John proudly displays on the walls of his museum. Most of these items were actually made by him.
This is called a hunting sword. This is Revolutionary period. They mainly were used in Europe, but they were brought over here, and there were several that were made here in this country. This is one of 12 that I smithed myself.
John's skills as a reenactor even landed him on the History Channel and in the movies. He starred as an extra in The Last of the Mohicans.
I was involved with portraying a British soldier in the daytime, and then I did the portrayal of a French at night. So, like I told you, I could have wound up fighting myself.
Another part of John's museum collection is dedicated to the military. He has a vast collection of personal and family items that cover several decades.
Well, being an old Navy man, well, you gotta like ships, okay? There was a time period before I got out that we'd been all over the South Pacific, and Several times we stopped in Subic Bay, Philippines, and they had a hobby shop. Well, a lot of the guys like to go over and drink and raise cane, whatever. You get tired of that after a while. So I decided to get me some wood, and I built a model of the ship. And that model went all over the South Pacific with me. And since I have my museum now, I've built other ships on a larger scale. One of the ships is the USS Indiana, which I seen them cut up in 1963 out in San Francisco.
Probably the largest and most impressive piece in the collection that also gets the most attention is the 1941 Dodge Command Car.
During the Second World War, a lot of the guys named their vehicles after their wives or their sweethearts. Linda Ann is my wife's name, and she's also the lien holder and my banker. That's what I always tell everybody. Anyway, this is a 1941 Dodge Command Car. It's built on a half-ton truck chassis. The government contract that this particular vehicle was built under, there's just under 8,000 of them. Now, other government contracts, they built more, but this is a real early car. It was put into service February the 20th of 1941, so it was already in service prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor. This car was a recon car. That's why I have this water-cooled 30 mounted here on it. The officers mainly rode around in them, but there was other soldiers that rode in them also. This car has its original 6-cylinder engine in it. Here on the dash it says maximum speed 45 miles per hour. That is all you want to do. I had it there once. I'll never do that again.
John purchased the car in Wisconsin. At the time, it had been cut apart and made into a farm truck. He was able to retrieve the back half and put it together again.
It had sat for 10 years and nothing run or moved or anything. And my son helped me. We put a new ignition system on it, put a battery in it, stuck a gas line over into a can, and on the third crank it took off. It's been running ever since.
Getting it running was one thing. Getting it restored was another. But John was on a mission to complete the project for a very special deadline.
I bought this so that my grandson could help me restore this. This was going to be a project for the two of us together. After about the second day of working on it, my grandson comes to me and tells me, "Hey, Grandpa, I'm leaving." I said, "What are you talking about?" He joined the Army. And so while he was away at boot camp and his other training that he went through and all, I hustled, working 10 hours a day, 7 days a week to get this vehicle ready so that when he came home before he went to Iraq, yes, I wanted us to have some time with the vehicle. And so that's how that all came about. That took, I think it was just over 3 months.
Now restored, the car makes its way out to lots of parades, reenactments, and anything that has to do with supporting the troops.
Anytime that I can do anything to make more people aware of our history, why, I'm willing to do it. I've always believed in have all the fun you can. I mean, you have to have a full-time job, you know, but grab all the gusto, you only go around once.
To many, wood stoves are simply a way to heat the house, but to Mattoon's Wally Taylor, they're a piece of beautiful artwork that can be collected, restored, and admired. And that's exactly what he does.
It was either a stroke of good luck or bad luck, and sometimes I think it was bad luck. But this junk dealer in town, frankly a good friend of mine, was in there one day and he said, I want to show you a stove. I said, I don't want to see a stove. He said, oh, it's just over here a little ways. I'll take you over in a truck and we'll look at it. I'm not into stoves, Bill, forget it. Well, I went over to see the stove. And there's a pile of pieces and it's rusty, and I walk around it and I walk around it and I keep looking at it and it grabbed me. So I got it and I still have it. I won't sell it, but I've threatened a number of times, somewhat facetiously, to shoot him, who got me started being a stover. My kids wish I'd gone into coin collecting or stamp collecting, because I have one stove that weighs 740 pounds. Nobody's attempted to steal it, and I still have it.
Mattoon resident Wally Taylor started his stover journey just over a decade ago.
Gem City Stove Manufacturing Company, Quincy, Illinois, 1903.
He says there's really no method to the madness. He loves them in all shapes and sizes simply because they're beautiful.
It's basically the fact that they are works of art. The old ones, I'm talking the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, all through the Victorian period. Beautiful stoves. And I don't know why anybody wouldn't love them. But that's basically it. They're just absolutely works of art. And the ingenious aspect of the craftsman, you wouldn't believe what those people were able to do back then. I'm reminded, someone once said that arrogance is forgetting the intellect of the past. And if you see some of the old stoves, you will see the intellect there. It becomes an addiction. So every stove you see, you try to buy, you've got to have it. Nothing against the old ladies, but elderly ladies like their silver spoons. That's the way I was with my stoves. Got to keep them close to me, you know. And you get one, and then you get another one, and you restore them, and quite frankly, some of them are absolutely beautiful. They are works of art. I have one which is even advertised as artistry in iron. The addiction is still there. My last stove, it's been almost 2 weeks since I got another one.
Not only does Wally collect stoves, he restores them too.
It takes a lot of elbow grease and rust remover and sandblasting, and then nickel plating, but I don't do nickel plating. I don't even do sandblasting, but I have it done. But take particular parts, the finial and the swing away and the wings, etc., and have that nickel plated. So that's about it, and the painting. So that's it.
While stoves are Wally's most recent passion, his lifelong passion is teaching. Whether at a local community college, on ships around the world, or just at home in his backyard, he never misses the opportunity for a lesson.
Back in the old day, certainly in Nova Scotia and maybe not in New England, the word stove did not mean a heating stove like we see it today, but it was a room in the house which was warm. So it was a drying room, and it was not a real stove, so to speak. Along that same line is the word curfew. When you think of curfew, you think of 10 o'clock at night, clear the streets. Well, once again, back in the day, a curfew was a product which was used to cover the coals so that you would have something to start with the next morning.
Wood stoves date back to the 1800s and have been primarily used for heating and cooking. Just like many inventions that stand the test of time, stoves have gone through functional and decorative periods like Victorian and other eras. Wally's favorite happens to be a stove that's old in style, but newer in creation year.
It's blue. You seldom ever see a blue stove. You can see blue enameled ones from time ago, but this had blue paint on it. And it, as mentioned, is a Todd stove. And you would think it was made in the 1850s, or maybe the 1860s. But on the hearth being the shelf right underneath the feed door, it says Webster Stove Company, St. Louis, 1980. Now this seems amazing that you look at this as 1980, but it looks like a stove from the 1860s. The rest of the story, as Paul Harvey might say, the Webster Company in 1975 found a pattern to this stove in an old foundry in Alabama, and the pattern was 1857. So they took that pattern, made the stove, and it's a 1980. It's a 1980, 1857 stove, and it's beautiful.
Wally told us stories about the fascinating history behind the naming conventions on stoves, how their function has evolved but stayed similar over the years, and many others. While I couldn't fit it all in here, I did want to make sure to leave you with what he said that really stood out to me and that I'm starting to believe. All stovers, according to Wally, are nuts.
There are a lot of stove nuts. There's probably 300 throughout the United States. And one of them bills himself as the stove nut from Iowa. Another one simply calls himself the stove nut. But they're all nuts. Stovers are nuts. They will go, you won't believe how far they will go to either look at a stove or to buy a stove. Don't buy an old stove, you might get addicted.
Now, one would think America's only hippie memorial would have been built by, well, a hippie. But that's not the case. We made a stop in Arcola, Illinois to witness firsthand a 63-foot mangled masterpiece of junk. Kelly Runyon brings us this story.
Away near some railroad tracks just off of Main Street in Arcola, you'll find America's one and only Hippie Memorial, created by Bob Moomaw. And if you ask Sharon Moomaw if it's okay to call her late husband's work of art a bunch of junk, she's quick to say yes.
It's junk. They're parts and pieces from cars that he worked on, and he had several of the young people around here would come in and weld and cut them for him and help him put them up. And they liked it. They were doing something that was a little bit controversial, so they really liked it.
But this junk has a lot of meaning, especially to Bob Moomaw. Each foot, and there's 63 of them, representing a year in his life. We start with the first 3 decades, which included the Depression, World War II, and the Red Scare. The middle section scales a bit higher, more colorful, representing the Kennedy years and coming of the hippies. The last reflecting the Reagan years, which according to Bob were some not so colorful times.
He said it was like his life, and he wanted to make it look like that. He said that the first 26 years of his life were things that when you are living life, things stick to you from different people and different circumstances that happen to you. So they're like pieces of junk, which is what he did, put pieces of junk on in the first ones, and they're rusty, they're supposed to be. These were the next couple of years. It was when the hippies came out. You had your flower children, you had, of course, the drug thing, but that wasn't what he was celebrating. You had more music, more art then. He appreciated that. And then about the time that we started back into doing politics again, that was the rest of his life.
Bob Moomaw was an artist, but at times also had a beef with the government, which is why some people might ask why a free-spirited hippie might have created such a piece. Well, thing is, Bob was no hippie.
No, he wasn't. Sometimes he said, even though in college he had long hair and the beard like everybody did then, but he said to his shame he wasn't. He said I buckled down because he had 5 kids to raise, and he was going to school to learn to make things and do things better. But he said I had to look to the hippies sometimes to see that they had free choice, so I had to remember I had that choice also.
So to work he went on the memorial to express himself. The work started in his shop, not far from where the memorial now stands. Bob Moomaw was a creator, an artist, and a hard worker for the Illinois Central Railroad. Fitting, his memorial now rests feet away from a set of tracks. Before Bob's passing, he said the crossbars were the webs of his life. As his life passed through time, other people's junk stuck to him. He left the pieces raw so they would rust, and according to him, that's the way life is. And speaking of life,
this sculpture is 63 feet long. He died when he was 63. I don't know if that's something prophetic or not, but we thought it was.
For this final story, we meet Charleston, Illinois repurposer Jim Standerfer, who has a knack for creating new and interesting pieces from just about anything. Kyle Fisher, an Eastern Illinois University Communication Studies major, brings us this story.
Audio Jungle.
My name is Jim Standerfer. I am the founder, owner, crew, and chief behemoth here at Lumbering Behemoth Construction and Design. I like to build stuff that's sort of unique and challenging and unusual. And so I was spending a lot of time in a studio building furniture and just sort of getting to do some creative stuff. And I just thought, wouldn't it be great if I could do this all the time? And so I quit my job and crossed my fingers and, gave it a shot. I see things that are cast off, and I guess there seems to be like a glimmer of potential in some items. What I've said to people before is it sort of tells me eventually what it wants to be. Finally it just sort of clicks in my brain that, I could put a light bulb in that, or I could stick some legs under that, or whatever it happens to be, or I'm just gonna put a hook on the back and we're gonna hang it on the wall. There's just like there's something in there that just seems like it needs to be something else, like it's just not quite ready to be thrown away yet. I guess I just sort of got on a little bit of a lighting kick a couple weeks ago, and there's something so satisfying about taking something that's just sort of this useless piece of stuff that doesn't really do anything but take up space on my porch, and then all of a sudden when it's dark outside I can use it to read or to not trip on things. And so it's like this immediate function, and it's electricity, and it's there's something really dynamic about lighting. And so for the rest of that week, I just kind of, anything else that I had thought that I wanted to turn into a lamp, I did. So I made a whole lot of lamps in 1 week. My grandfather, who was the guy who commissioned and owned that lamp, the guy who tromped off into the desert to pick up the dead cactus and drive it from somewhere in the Southwest all the way back to Illinois. He was the kind of guy who went to a lot of auctions. He scrapped things for people, scrap metal and stuff, basically for his whole life. So, when I was a kid, he had barns full of stuff. I've actually got a cabinet over there that's got drawers on it. And the handles of the drawers actually came off of a coffin that he had in his barn when I was a kid, and I remember he fascinated with that. I don't know that he built a lot of stuff out of junk or found items, but he sure had a lot of those found items around. I think maybe that drive to not throw things away comes from that. My cousin Jake, who's a dear friend of mine and just virtually my brother, has the same sort of bent. He can't stand to see things thrown away and wants to get things and use them. So I inherit a lot of stuff from him too. He just brings things to me. So yeah, I mean I guess I hate to call it dumpster diving because I don't know that I've ever actually dove into a dumpster, but that urge to salvage things and to keep them, I think is long-standing. I'm not sure it's genetic, but it might be.
We're so glad you joined us for Heartland Highways today.
If you'd like to learn more about our adventures anytime, you can visit our website at weiu.net. And if you have questions or suggestions for us, you can always email those to heartlandhighways@weiu.net.
We'll see you next time. Heartland Highways is made possible in part by EIU's Academy of Lifelong Learning, providing all community members an outlet for their educational, social, and creative pursuits. Opportunities to learn new skills, engage in topics of interest, and explore new areas of learning, available for people of all ages. More information available at 581-5114.